Yes, it is being recorded now, and the clerk will take the roll.
Directors Deppie,
Here.
Madavi,
Here.
Natoli,
Here.
Director Sheriff Watts,
You're muted,
Hi.
Director Sheriff-Watt.
Director Sheriff Watts, you're muted. Okay. And President Hakai.
Here. I'd like to ask the general manager if there have been any changes to the agenda that we need to report on.
There are no changes to the agenda, although if it's pleases the president and board, I was going to take the opportunity to talk a little bit briefly about the changes to the agenda format. There's been quite a few questions about it. So 3 big changes to the agenda format. One is that we've moved all the commentary narrative towards the end of the agenda and put all the business of the board at the top. We've consolidated the public comment with the consent calendar comment. It's now called Community and Consent Calendar Forum. So it is an opportunity to both make public comment that is not on the agenda as well as comments that are on the consent calendar during the same time frame. And lastly, the third significant change really is there are now titles with recommended action. So it's very clear to the public the action that staff is asking of the board to take, as well as a contact person for each agenda item. So hopefully this will enhance some of the transparency on the agenda and the work of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. So there is no closed session report at this time because we did not have a closed session since the last meeting. So there is no report at this time, correct, Anne? Okay. So as General Manager Brown said, all matters on the consent calendar are generally considered routine and approved by one motion and vote unless a board member or the general manager requests that a matter be taken off the consent calendar. Anyone who wants to address the board at this time for comments, for oral comments up to 3 minutes for items that are not on the agenda or items that are part of the consent calendar will raise their hand via the Zoom application, and then I will call on you and you will be unmuted and you can address the board for up to 3 minutes. While it's not required, if you are so inclined to state your name clearly for the recording and for the minutes, that would be great, but that is not required. And please remember that only items that are not on the agenda could be addressed because we are not permitted to take any discussion that is not on the posted agenda. If you have anything that you want to distribute to the board in an in-person meeting, you would hand it to the clerk, but you are also at this time able to email it to the clerk of the board or mail it, and her information is prominent throughout the agenda. So I'm going to look at participants now, and if I could get anyone who plans to comment at this time to raise their hand so I can just ascertain how many folks we have to make sure that our 3-minute time frame is going to work. I would appreciate that, so I have a sense. Right now I see 2 hands only raised, so I'm going to find those attendees. I see 5. Okay. All right, so I will go ahead and start calling on people. Please try to respect the 3 minutes. I will be keeping time and want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. So again, thank you. And I will begin now with Catherine Deniergard. Hold on one moment. Catherine, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. Hi.
Okay, thank you.
So this is Catherine Deniergard, and I would like to urge the board in as strong terms as possible to reinstate the Finance Committee. Many people have written about this and given reasons why. I think a main reason is that there's a lot of expertise in the community, and one paid professional or several even can't really replace that. And so, so much benefit to Kensington is lost by losing the standing committees. but also losing citizen participation in democracy. I've been thinking a lot about democracy recently, and feel it isn't just, voting or, listening to speeches, but what is it to engage in a democratic process? And I think a major function of democracy, including the board, is to empower citizens in democratic processes and discuss and espouse citizen concerns for a better Kensington. And so I just, as I said, strongly urge you to reinstate the Finance Committee. And also, it didn't sound very good order how it was gotten rid of. It wasn't sufficiently agendized. And related to that, I just wanted to say that it's easy, it's easy to be in power and just get rid of everybody. And sometimes from the other side of the funhouse mirror, that feels like what's going on, that the public is just gotten rid of, and the latest agenda changes are sort of obscure. Actually, the print is so small that even with glasses, I have a hard time seeing it, and it does make one less opportunity for the public to speak when you combine initial public comments with consent calendar items. And what was great about Kensington democracy was that there was a very involved citizenry that was caring about Kensington and trying to help in so many ways. And so again, I would encourage the board to be more forthcoming about what it's thinking and doing, and also to reinstate all of the standing committees. That might be boring to some people, but they got some great things done. The Park Standing Committee was really great, and the work on the garbage contract was really great. And
You've hit your 3 minutes.
okay, I've hit my 3 minutes. I think you got what I was saying.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Linda Lipscomb, you're next. And you should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Oh, it feels so good to get unmuted. Hi, folks. Thanks for being there. But I'm not very happy that the letter that I wrote to you, which I was joined in by 6 other attorney citizens, regarding the notice for the meeting where you got rid of the Finance Committee, is not part of the packet as I had requested. We believe that the notice was inadequate and substantially misleading. It called for the business item as renumbering and amending the policy that established the Citizens Finance Committee. And you could dig a little and find out that's what really was afoot. But the average person taking a look on the website wouldn't have known that. Accordingly, I think it denied access to people. It also was the 10th item at the end of a very long meeting. You were actually deleting the policy. You weren't renumbering, and you weren't amending the numbers, amending it. You were deleting the policy, and there was no notice of this. I think the law is otherwise. It seems that the trajectory of this board under the rubric of professionalizing its activities is to put it at the expense of citizen participation and input, which the Finance Committee was a premier example of. And that is fundamental. It is a fundamental underpinning of democracy. And it's something we always had here. I was terribly sad to see the last Citizen Standing Committee go in the dark of night and with confusing and mischaracterization words on the agenda. I suppose that might mean my time is up, but I'll ask you, I think you did wrong. I'd ask you to please reconsider the item. Go back, take a look at it. If you're still bent on it, yes. but, put it on the agenda as a deletion of policy to disestablish the finance committee and see what happens then. It's a great loss to the community. And as I say, I was joined by 6 other attorney citizens in the opinion that this was inadequate and moreover misleading notice to the community. Thus, it is a denial of access, which is required by the Brown Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Oh, hold on. Okay. Next up is Pat Gillette. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Pat, and you may start.
Great, thank you, and hello, everybody. I want to echo the comments made by Catherine and Linda regarding the Finance Committee, but I want to speak to a bit of a bigger issue that underlies and was hinted at, or maybe stated directly by Linda, and that is that as the board to do what it calls professionalizing its role, you are eliminating one of the most important parts of our community, and that is the voices of the citizens. And we've just been through 4 years of an administration that tried to tamp down public support and public comment. And I would hate to see that trickle into what is our community. Our community is one that has a lot of people who know a lot about government, who know a lot about law, who know a lot about community. And we've always been able to come together and solve problems together. The ad hoc committee is one of the best examples of how citizens working together came and gave information to the board when I was on it. It was really critical to thinking about how we might restructure our community services district. And what we've done with eliminating the finance committee is really taken away the voice of the people. I don't understand what the rationale is. I don't understand why you would want to do that, especially since many of you ran on what you called transparency, and yet the board is getting more or less and less transparent. The other issue I want to raise is the issue that was really articulately put forth by Jim Watt in the Outlook this last month, where he suggested that perhaps we ought to think about consolidation between the police district and the fire district. This is something that was studied a little bit by the ad hoc committee, but basically they couldn't get into it as deeply as possible. And I'd suggest that perhaps this board agendize an item for one of its meetings where we have a discussion, or hold a town meeting where you actually might invite citizens to participate, and they don't have to be regulated by all the rules you've now put in place to limit our voices. Maybe we have a discussion and we actually invite people to speak up. So I really would encourage you. I think you all want to do the right thing. I'm going to assume good intentions, but that's not how it's being perceived by the community. Making decisions that aren't fully articulated, that aren't fully explained, changing the agenda so it looks like there are no public comments, putting items at the very end of the night where people aren't going to be there, that impact our community is not the way we should run our community. It's not the way you should want to be remembered as board members. So I encourage you to both reinstate the finance committee, or at least have a discussion about it. And secondly, to begin a discussion about consolidation so we can act as one community with one set of taxpayer dollars that funds both police and our fire department.
You've hit your limit. Thank you, Pat.
Where's Lindsay?
Okay, next up is Carolyn Tipton. And give me one moment.
Lindsay. Lindsay.
Hold on one second. I will try to mute that. And Carolyn, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
I just did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I won't take the whole 3 minutes. I just wanted to be here and speak up in support of the other speakers. I was alarmed that the finance committee was gotten rid of. That's the last citizen committee. I think there should be more daylighting. I think things should be made more obvious to the community. I'm very worried about outsourcing the police. I don't want to do that. I want to keep them here. I don't want to be annexed to El Cerrito. And there are a lot of issues floating around, and I would like to think that we would be able to vote on a lot of these major things. But things are happening, it looks like almost in secret, in the dark. And so I just wanted to voice my support of the other speakers, and starting with bringing back the Finance Committee, the last citizen committee that we had. Thank you.
Thank you. And Elaine Stelton is our last speaker at this moment. As far as I can tell, I will double check again. And Elaine, you should be able to unmute yourself and make your statement.
Hi, good evening. I did a little research and I found a lot of communities, every community, in fact, that I checked in with has professional staff, of course, preparing their budget, but they also have finance committees. So Walnut Creek has a finance committee, Danville has a finance committee, Richmond has a finance committee, Contra Costa has a finance committee, and John Joya sits on that committee. Albany has a finance committee, El Cerrito has a finance committee, Lafayette has a finance committee, Orinda has a finance committee, and the list goes on. So your reason for eliminating the finance committee, at least one of your major reasons, holds no water with almost every other community in our area. I think you really have to rethink this. I think Chris Depp's reason of saying that it was not inclusive to have a finance committee, it's more inclusive to have zero community participation, is absolutely ludicrous. There's just no other way to put it. You have no citizen involvement. You should be incredibly embarrassed. And I want to also mention that, you know, you all are volunteers. You obviously see some value in volunteering. Why won't you let anyone else volunteer? Is there any good reason that you have for having zero volunteers at this point assisting you, or anyone from the community giving you any input whatsoever, other than you don't want to hear anyone else's voices?
Nice.
That is not democracy.
Okay, I will take that as the end of your statement.
She's such an ass.
Everyone realize that you're not always not muted. Please be conscious of whether you're on mic or not. Okay, if everyone could please put their hand down if you've spoken once, then I want to clear the board of any hands that are up. And see if there's anybody else that wants to speak. Great. So we have great community participation and attendance today, and we will continue on with our agenda. So we are now going to the consent calendar. And are there any board members who wish to remove anything from the consent calendar? Okay. So,
actually, I had a quick question on the financial report.
Okay, I mean, that is from the last meeting. Go ahead, Cyrus, I guess you want to ask Catherine a question?
Well, I just wanted to more or less double check if I'm ensuring that we're actually this year, it sounds like we're underperforming in what we predicted we would bring in. Based on, this is, let's see, line, let me pull it up again. So many items. Okay, so it is the total income, the total under 440. So it says that we were budgeted for, or assuming 3.5 million this year, but it looks like we're at 3.45 million this year, and we're at 98% income, or at least what we're assuming. We're going to take it. Am I correct in assuming we've pulled in everything this year and there's really not anything else to scrap in?
Well, partially. There's some money that will come in from, the police grant, the police grants that come in. And then also in June, we will get a little bit, we'll get more money also, I believe, and in April also. So I don't believe that this is this isn't taking into account everything.
This is just a mid-year. This was from the mid-year
This is
budget
just the
review,
mid-year. So
which we discussed last meeting. So there's still more to come.
yes, correct.
Okay.
But there is the underperformance from the, no expected community center revenue. And that line, I believe we still actually have to take that out of here and adjust that. That hasn't been reflected in this one, but it will be by the next month's.
Okay, and I was just, as a quick follow-up, I'm like, so was there clarity gotten on how much is in our total liquid cash at the moment? Because I think last time it was like, the estimate was 1.6, and I think it was mentioned that someone would check with the county.
Well, right now we're working on, with the auditors, we're working on everything. So we have a pretty good idea of what the fund balance is or was at the end of last year. So at 6/30/2020. So I'm hoping by the next meeting, we'll have something to report to you that's 100% accurate.
Okay, well, because I guess there's what was we had at the end, then there's also what the county currently has in the bank. And I think we're nearing the point where
They currently have about 1.1 million,
1.1.
I believe.
Or what was like, well, I'm wondering if we could get an actual hard number on that, just because that tends to help, given how the district takes in and spends money.
Let me just find the most recent. So I'm sorry, at February 2021, the ending balance is 1.487.
Okay. I'd like to note that this is the January 2021 financial report, not a current, agendized item. So I think we should move on. Cyrus, if you have additional questions, we can do that at the next meeting, or you can speak with Marty directly about current financials, if you don't mind.
Okay, I just want to go to
yeah, I know.
Understanding this report.
Yeah, okay. It is January, so. All right, so any other questions?
I have some questions. Catherine, I can't understand the first and second column and why they're different numbers. You've got a January 31st, 2021 actual, and then a July 1st, 2020 to January 31st, 2021 actual. And some of the numbers are sometimes the same, sometimes they're different.
Since I just came back to do this, Jesse's taking care of this top report, and I just reviewed it, and this was her format that she used. If I need to change this format for next month, I will, but I didn't change it from what she was doing last month. She produced this report, and I just, reviewed it. So I thought that this was all kind of what you guys wanted. So we can take out one of those columns if it's not making sense.
Well, it would seem like the January 31st, 2021 is redundant to the July 1st, 2020 to July 31st, 2021 column. I don't know unless the January 31st, 2021 is supposed to be a single month, but that doesn't appear to be what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of wondering the same thing. So we can revise this report for next month and make it more clear.
And then I have a question on the title of item 440. It says district activities revenue, but it sounds like this is the revenue from the franchise fee, which is Bayview, not quite a district activity, but somewhat.
That's correct. That is Bayview, and I guess it's always been called franchise fees It's always been called this in QuickBooks. So,
I
you know,
guess I never noticed it, but also just the numbers just don't make sense to me, but maybe you'll, when you have a chance, you can help figure that out. Yeah.
I'd like to ask for some guidance from council about whether we should pull this item or we should, you know, there's a lot of questions about it. This is an item from the January 2021 finance report. And it, you know, do we just pull it and come back? Of course, we come back, it's not going to be a January 2021 report any longer.
Well, we could pull it and discuss the format issues at the next agenda. I think that it is starting to become too much of a discussion for an item that's agendized for consent. So I would recommend you continue it and ask staff for more information about the format at the next meeting.
Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to continue. They're going to pull that item and continue it and have you come back with a new financial report. And I'll let you and Marty decide whether that should just be a mid-year through the mid-year or you want to do something that's more current. But there's just too many. We had no questions like this when we discussed this a month ago. And in fact, we had a pretty thorough discussion of this last month. So we'll I'll pull that item and we're going to just consider the minutes. So if there are no other questions or objections, I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt the consent calendar with only item 1. Unfortunately,
I move that,
we can't hear you, so I think Director Deppie is going to make the motion.
Yeah, I move that we adopt item 1 of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
I guess table, well, that's probably the simplest, just that we adopt item 1 of the consent calendar.
Okay, and I will second the motion. All those in favor, I'll do a roll. Director Deppie?
Yes.
Director Modavi?
Aye.
Director Shariswat? All right, can you give us a thumbs up or down because we are still not hearing you? That's an aye from Director Shariswat. Is that acceptable, council? Okay.
Yes.
And Director Natoli?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to go now to the discussion and action calendar. And in fact, many citizens like that have complained in the past that some of the more important business of the board is set to very late in the evening. So that is one reason why the business items have been moved forward and the more routine items saved toward the end. The first item will be introduced by the general manager. I'll remind everybody that these items are going to be acted on individually, and if a member of the public wishes to speak on any of them for up to 3 minutes, when I ask for public comment, we'll do the same process as before. Please raise your hand via Zoom. I'd like to try to get a sense of how many comments we will have, and then I will call on you and unmute you, and then you'll have your 3 minutes. Again, if you don't mind stating your name, that would be great. And we're asking everyone always to speak once on an item. And for there, I will go ahead and ask the general manager to go ahead and introduce this item.
Good evening, everyone. The item that is before you this evening is to accept a $15,000 donation from KCC. And this is a $15,000 donation that was already agreed to prior to the renovation of the community center. And the idea was that it would be used for landscaping and exterior purposes, such as purchasing a bench, helping with irrigation, creating a better exterior storage closet for tools and things like that for maintaining the area immediately around the community center. Nothing's, etched in stone. Those were just some of the ideas that I heard were in the works at the time that this donation was being discussed and negotiated. I believe Ann Forrest is here and she was going to say a few words possibly.
I will call on Ann if there's no other thing from you.
That's it. Those are,
okay.
Yeah.
Ann, I'm happy to welcome you to speak. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, and happy to welcome you again back to our meeting.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ann Forrest, and I'm here representing the KCC board. I'm a member of the board. And at this time, we would like to present the KPPCSD with the additional donation of the $15,000 towards the landscaping and is going to go along with the recent renovation of the community center. This money, I want to stress, was donated by many community members that were eager to see the completion of the community center. And they realized that the community center is sort of the centerpiece of what is our very prized Kensington Park. And we're anxious to all get back into the park and back into the community center and to use it for all the different organizations and classes and camps that we've had for so many years. I want to thank everybody that donated directly and also who participated in the raffle of the quilt that was beautifully done by Mabry Benson, and she donated the quilt, and we had a raffle earlier this year, and the raffle was won by our very own Chris Hall, who is the person who has done so much for the farmers market. So that was great. It all worked out, and we're happy to donate this money to the KPPCSD. We would love to be able to help with some ideas of how to spend it.
Well, thank you so much. And again, Anne really highlights the wonderful community participation that we have here in Kensington. And I want to also give a special thank you to Mabry Benson, who's a extremely accomplished quilter and lent considerable time and talents to this effort. I hope that she feels a great sense of pride already, and even more so once more improvements are made. So with that, the really only action we have is to accept this donation. I don't believe this requires a vote of the board unless my counsel nods otherwise. So it does require.
If you're taking an action, it requires a vote, and it seems like your acceptance is an action.
Okay, well, seems a little, clearly, hopefully a very easy action to take. I will recommend and make a motion. I'd like to make the motion that the board accept the $15,000 donation from the Kensington Community Council for landscape improvements around the community center. And I will go ahead and wait for a second.
Sylvia, I have a question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Chris. I'm sure for comment or board comments.
It's just a little clarification. It says it's towards landscaping. Is there some sort of an agreement that goes along with this? There's just sort of a shake hands, here's the money, and we hope you use it.
We are accepting it for the purpose of landscape improvements. Some of these have been discussed in the past. There are some rebuilding of the circular planters, the purchase of a bench in front of the community center, and just overall, and 15,000 can contribute toward.
So it's in general whatever we want to use it for.
Around landscape improvements, yes. But it is designed for that purpose, not necessarily any other specifics. But some of the things that had to be done have been discussed, such as the planters. There's a broken lattice work around some of the utilities. These are just items that were noticed as we finished up the renovation. Okay. So there is a motion on the table to accept the donation. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you. And we're looking for a roll call vote. Director Deppie, Director Natoli, Director Modavi, and Director Sharaswat. Up or down? Nope. Can you get, all right, Director Sharaswat signals yes with the thumbs up motion, a double thumbs up, and the motion, and I vote yes, the motion passes 5-0. Okay, and now we're going to have another item which is of great interest to our community and to this board for sure. And it is a preliminary needs assessment and financial analysis of issues surrounding the future home of the KPPCSD. So we are going to receive the staff presentation, which will be introduced by General Manager Marty Brown. After the item is presented, I will open it up for public comment. If there are any questions of the presentation, you're certainly welcome to make them in your comments, but we're going to let the staff kind of note all the questions. And then at the end, after all the public has spoken, staff will address as many of them as they can before we go to any kind of board discussion. So General Manager Brown, please go ahead and present the item.
Okay, well, here we go.
And just to be aware, your sound is a little off. I don't know if there's anything related to your internet connectivity. It's a little shaky, I would say. It is clear, but it's a little wobbly.
Maybe turn up the volume, maybe, does that help some?
Try again.
Does that help any? I just turned up the volume.
It helps hear you. There's still a little bit of a weird kind of a static in the background. I'm not sure what else to say.
Okay, I'm not sure what I can do about it. I'm sorry about that. Could be the speaker on the computer, maybe. Let's give this a try. I've got this here from the beginning. There we go. Okay, so just a quick kind of preface I'd like to say before getting started. This was a team effort, and it was done with the police chief and Captain Gankaz and the budget manager and myself, working on this for the past several weeks. It is done all by staff and using existing files and reports. There was no outside consulting other than a little bit of pro bono help that we were able to all secure from different places in our own disciplines. But generally speaking, I kind of think of this as hitting the reset button on sort of getting everybody, making sure we're all on the same page together before, moving forward, especially with the joint board meeting on March 25th, and then any further analysis or direction that would be given by the board. So with that, I wanted to we're teeing up this presentation with just kind of a reminder in general that not only public safety facilities, but all public agency facilities sooner or later tend to outgrow their needs. Either their staffing grows, their communities grow, and oftentimes what ends up happening is the situation we find ourselves in, so much so that even the International Association of Chiefs of Police have clearly wanted to make a comment and statement about this phenomena that is not unique to Kensington, the outgrowing of our facility and our needs to some extent. So with that, the objective was just to kind of get a current status on the project and look at existing and future working conditions, some public safety considerations for district employees, industry standards for police facilities, and then sort of a preliminary analysis of the most promising options that are available in terms of housing the police department, but also the entire district, including the administrative staff. So the outline is an introduction and overview. We'll visit some of the regulatory and administrative framework that we work in, the environment we work in, especially the police department, but also to some extent the administrative staff, industry standards for public police facilities, employee safety and continuity of service considerations, and then looking at some of the location housing options for the police department and the district, as well as a preliminary financial analysis. So just to let you know, myself and Captain Gankaz are going to pitch hit on this together. I'm going to do this first section, and then I'm going to be handing it over to him for the middle section of the presentation. So the current status is, this discussion's been going on for several years, as you all know. Several scenarios have been considered, but perhaps the most, I think the most relevant ones here are renovating the existing building footprint for both fire and KPD, and that's something that has been discussed and you've already seen plans for. Renovating existing building for the fire district and relocating the police district to another facility, which could include buying or leasing an existing facility or building a new facility on vacant land, and then building a new joint public safety building, another option. So we've mostly for the past several months been focusing on renovating the existing building for fire and police to share. But meanwhile, district staff have also been exploring other lease options for existing buildings to accommodate the police department and district staff. So the building, public safety building, was constructed in 1970. It was remodeled in 1999. Since then, there's been significant, since 1946, there's been significant change, obviously, in the staffing levels. 46 started out with 2 officers. Since 2000, we've fluctuated between 6 and 10. That range is there because we actually had some difficulty nailing down precisely how many police officers were budgeted for versus actually filled. And so there's been times when there's been a larger budget, but there's been a number of vacancies. So that's pretty much the range since 2000. There's a lot of regulatory reporting and demands that have changed since 1946 for police as well as fire. And staffing and regulatory conditions, you know, even as those have changed and the staffing levels have increased, the workspace really hasn't changed all that much. One example is the Department of Justice. We're not in compliance with the Department of Justice requirements. There's a lack of space for confidential work, like performance evaluations. There isn't, as you know, a owned or leased space for administrative staff, and there are currently 6 part-time administrative support staff. Lack of confidential physical storage and filing of our documents, like personnel documents. And overall, there's a challenge in the workspace in the sense that confidential matters have to be postponed sometimes because there are people in the office that in a space that can't be there while another officer is working on a confidential matter. So overall, reducing efficient use of staff time. There's also just a lack of privacy for routine work. One person writing a report needs to be focused differently than a person on the phone with a member of the community. And there just isn't that much space for that kind of work. And then the social distancing, of course, continues to be a problem in the public safety building, both for police and fire, and would be a problem in the future if we have another public health emergency. And then there's also just a shortage of restroom facilities. So with that, I'm going to hand over the presentation now to Captain Gankas, who's going to take it from here until the very end. Whoops, I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess we're here. Okay, I'll be careful.
Good morning. I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. Is my volume okay? Okay. Good evening, Board of Directors, General Manager Brown, Chief Schuld, and the community. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak this evening on this important program. I'd like to start off by explaining Sigis Compliance, and it relates to the first bullet point you see at the top of your screen. Criminal Justice Information Services, just a quick overview, it's an essential tool used by every law enforcement agency. The information exchange system is governed and standards are set by the FBI. A security policy has been established and set in place that all users must comply with. The essential premise of the Sigis security policy is to provide appropriate controls to protect the full life cycle of CJI, whether at rest or in transit. The Sigis security policy provides guidance for the creation, viewing, modification, transmission, and dissemination of information. The Sigis security policy integrates presidential directives, federal laws, FBI directives, and the criminal justice community's APB decisions, along with nationally recognized guidance from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The program sets the minimum requirements for housing this system. That information can be found in section 5.9 on pages 61 and 62 of the CJI manual. And it sounds boring, and I know it's arduous. Sometimes it confuses me. But that is required for us to house a system that is necessary to complete police work. The current proposed remodel plan lacks the required secure space for the CJI network equipment. Presently, we have some equipment that is in the parking lot level exercise room in the fire department where the MPOE, which is the main point of entry, is located. And the remaining equipment is stored in a small computer cabinet here in the building adjacent to a refrigerator. The proposed floor plan for remodeling needs to identify the location of a DOJ compliant secure computer room. Unfortunately, doing this will further reduce the proposed planned space allotted for police by 110 square feet. And space is really important. So the second bullet point I'll address, we've checked every agency in the county and found none store their evidence with another police department. And this is an essential requirement that all police agencies use. The county sheriff advised storing evidence at another location would compromise the integrity of the evidence itself, and it's counterproductive to safe industry standard practice. Storing our evidence at an offsite location also compromises our ability to control the purging of evidence and would otherwise leave our evidence exposed to additional purging, loss, or cross-contamination. The proposed building plan, if instituted, would leave out that required evidence room that we need to operate effectively. So that would we would lose effectively another 100 square feet of space. The third bullet point I'll address are necessity requirements for police reporting. The minimum requirements that we've found are 3 computers in a secure location for 6 police officers are necessary, and 2 computers for 2 patrol sergeants. That would be the minimum required. And this would facilitate smooth workflow and allow employees to perform the necessary job functions. The officer terminals currently are in a small room where many other critical and non-critical functions take place, and it's pretty impractical. And lastly, on bullet point 4, the confidential workspace requirements, which the general manager touched on. Administrative duties, counseling, interviews, performance reviews, use of force reviews, acts on body-worn camera reviews, citizen complaints, and citizen interviews. These are all important aspects necessary for maintaining a confidential workspace. Next slide, please. In deficiencies and constraints, I'd like to just start off with bullet point 1. We are experiencing a lack of space to keep necessary documents on hand. Some of the deficiencies and constraints in the existing building include the absence of adequate safe and secure storage to retain essential and confidential documents. Along with what's listed in the table that you see, we keep a supply of required forms necessary for accurate documentation here in the building. Some are required by the district attorney, some are required by the California Highway Patrol, some come from Adult Protective Services, and still others come from the Department of Justice. We work with many partnering agencies who all have their own forms which they require, and all of these are housed here in our building. Most are mandatory when processing paperwork interagency. And it's important to remember everything police officers do requires documentation, whether it be on the radio, through a computer terminal, or in written form. Along with police work forms, we keep internal affairs investigations, community forms, vacation watch documents, key program paperwork, and employee volunteer applications. These are just some of the many files that we keep here in the police department. And to say we're running out of space would be minimal. And lastly, on this slide, bullet point 3 refers to our restroom facility shortage. In fact, one restroom doesn't appear to have been designed for adults, and that one is shared by 6 police officers. So we could certainly use more restrooms for the amount of staff we have. Next slide, please. Administrative duties changes over time. This information provided in this slide was sourced from a law enforcement executive forum in 2011, showing the increasing administrative and report writing responsibilities required by our officers, supervisors, and administrative staff. The chart on the right shows the substantial increase in time required to complete the same job tasks across the years. For example, the administrative and report writing daily responsibilities for a police officer have increased from 1 hour and 49 minutes in the 70s to an average of 4 hours and 15 minutes today. It is important to note that Kensington is unique in that our officers sometimes are required to work alone. There is no support staff available, and they burden all of the responsibilities like evidence collection, witness interviews, crime scene processing, and completion of the booking paperwork and transport when an arrest is made. An average arrest, processing documentation, transport paperwork, and report writing can take as much as 6 hours to complete. If it is a driving under the influence arrest, which has far more paperwork and processing, it can take longer. Next slide, please. This slide represents some of the important essential duties for police sergeant and other police management. And I just wanted to highlight some of the many important essential functions to point out these duties transcend across the ranks and highlight the need for adequate office space. For example, plans, schedule, organize, assigns, reviews, evaluates the work of sworn and non-sworn staff on an assigned shift. That can be from the chief of police on down to a police sergeant. provide essential input into selection, disciplinary, and other personnel matters, and may counsel employees as required. They plan, develop, and present and maintain records of training programs, train staff, and work procedures, reviews and approves reports prepared by sworn staff. All of these duties require at least some form of office space to adequately complete on a regular basis. Next slide, please. This slide provides a snapshot of just some of the interactive work administrative staff at the police department and district staff work together on regularly. For example, in the past 2 days, we've met with district staff, talked about or planned ahead on programs to include budget, payroll, public information requests, policy-related matters, legislation and state mandates that require scheduling, training, and implementation. I'm referring to Assembly Bill 392. And I just want to point out that we work together very often and very, very effectively. So it would be incumbent if a best practice would be set up where we could work collaboratively in a facility that is under one roof. Next slide, please. I want to expand on the officer responsibilities here. And this is just a snapshot of the routine duties and activities and an average of time spent. So you can get an accurate overview of what is required by an officer or sergeant. On average, we believe that a Kensington police officer spends 75% of their time on patrol and 25% on administrative duties. Sergeants, that's cut in half. At least 50% of their workload is spent on patrol and 50% on administrative responsibilities. And one of the quotes on this slide that I believe is important is the one made by the presiding Los Angeles police chief. I'll quote him in saying 15 to 20 years ago, officers would spend 10 to 15% of their time on administrative tasks. But the number has ballooned today to over 50%. And as I mentioned in an earlier slide, a lot has changed in the job description and duties of a police officer compared to 20 years ago. Everything requires documentation, processing, and input. It may be on a computer terminal or on a form or in writing, but the need for adequate office space is an important factor to consider. And again, the charts show just an approximate average allocation of time spent completing the job duties of officers and sergeants today. Next slide, please. Industry standards, employee workspace. What you see there is a rendering of the remodeling of the current KPD facility in the top right corner. This information on this slide was sourced from a study completed by the Office of Government-Wide Policy, titled Workspace and Allocation Benchmark Report. The chart was generated from a survey taken during the report to show how much office space government entities allocate on average for employees. Basically, we wanted to know what was an industry standard, what was a baseline. The survey results show that 93% of employers provide 100 square feet of workspace per employee. Less than 3% of those surveyed during this study provided less than 75 square feet. The current Kensington Police Department employee office space averages between 38 and 56 square feet per employee. The proposed plan of remodeling that you see in the top right reduces the available PD space by 200 square feet from 1,220 down to 1,020. And when you include the Sigis Compliance storage room along with an evidence room, that's another 200 square feet of space that we would be taking away from the police department. Next slide, please. Police and fire operations. Police and fire operations are uncommon in the United States. For example, of the 18,000 police departments in the United States, less than 150 have consolidated services under one roof. However, when a joint public safety building has been designed to accommodate both professional disciplines with adequate space, there can be financial benefits to co-location. And I think that's important. Some of the nuances that are here in the existing building, the way it's designed is, you know, the law enforcement works a 12-hour shift. We work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Fire employees, they actually live on site. They sleep at night. They're awoke by 911 calls and respond to emergencies. But, you know, unfortunately for them, they're living in an active business. So I'm reminded of that every morning when I come to work at 6:30 to quietly come down the stairs, because they're obviously trying to get their sleep. So there are some nuances when working in a facility together with fire, unless it's designed accordingly to accommodate the needs of both. Next slide, please. This is a slide that depicts a fire district feasibility study that was sourced from Ross, Drellis, Quisenberry Architects, December 14th of 2016. It is important to start this slide off with some perspective. And as the board knows and the community knows, there have been several studies convened, commissioned, or proposed to accommodate both fire and police under one roof. You can find many of these studies online, and this is just one of them. In this chart, I will try to explain the numbers without confusing anyone, including myself, because I've had to read this chart 4 or 5 times. Right. The first disclaimer I'd like to make is the number 5 shown in the first column is incorrect. And it was printed like that in the study, but we didn't want to change it and confuse anyone, so we left it the same, and I highlighted it in red. The chart is meant to depict 8 officers in that column. And that is what was existing at the time of this report. And the existing space was 1,269 square feet with 8 police officers. The optimal, which is the third column that you'll see colored in black on the top, you'll see staff for policing at 8, and the optimal space needed is 3,668 square feet. And that was recommended by a third-party source and architect familiar with building police facilities. Presently today, we have 10 police officers and 2 civilian staffs occupying a space of approximately 1,269 square feet. There are some other options there that the architect provided, but they all clearly show, both in reduced capacity and optimal with cuts, well over 2,000 square feet of space for 8 staff. Next slide. And this slide is synonymous with this slide I mentioned previously. This was from a fire district presentation in 2019. The study is more recent, and the chart taken from the study is consistent with the previously mentioned recommendations, in that the police have approximately 1,200 square feet of space now, but optimally should have over 3,500. All of these studies can be found online in the public forum. With that, I want to thank the Board of Directors, General Manager Brown, Chief Schuld, and the community for allowing me to speak this evening. And I will turn the presentation back over to General Manager Brown.
I think you have one more, actually. Can you hear me, Mike?
I do. You're right. I do. I apologize. Yes, I do. I apologize. Next slide. Some of the considerations as well to think about. The public safety building is seismically unsound. Cracks are visible in the interior of the lobby, and all you need to do is come to the workplace here and take a look. Employee health and safety is something else to think about in a pandemic environment. Confined workspace. Our current situation presents serious health and safety challenges for first responders working in proximity without adequate ventilation. Public health preparedness. The current co-location hinders comprehensive preparedness for the next pandemic and/or public health emergency. There are some disadvantages to co-location. With our particular unique situation, the public safety building would likely be uninhabitable post-earthquake or fire, eliminating Kensington's only first responder facility and likely damaging apparatus, equipment, and other infrastructure. Therein lies the advantage to separate facilities. To mitigate the potential of irreparable damage to both police and fire facilities, we could separate our locations into 2 separate areas. Next slide.
Okay. I think it's my turn now.
I apologize.
No problem. All right, I'm gonna bring us home. So finally, we're at that place that I'm sure everybody's eager to talk about. What are the options for location? we talked about those briefly at the beginning. And so the first option seems to be to stay in the public safety building and lease 1,020 square feet from the fire district after it's renovated and seek other location for administrative support staff. The second option, option B, would be for the district to lease space in a separate location and hopefully co-locate the police department and administrative support staff. And option C would either be the police district and or the fire district, either separate or together, construct a new public safety building on vacant land in the district. So option A, we have estimated that for a temporary relocation of the police department during renovation would cost probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 one-time expense to do tenant improvements. We currently pay for the district pays to the fire district $3,050 per month. Now, we don't know what the cost is going to be, but I've spoken with General Manager Hensel about it, and we both agree it won't stay the same. It will increase. We just don't know by how much at this point, and we won't know until and unless we move forward with 100% construction drawings. And administrative staff would be housed somewhere else, and that would be at a minimum, and I've already done a little research on this, at a minimum cost point of $900 a month. Option B, a little bit more complicated, moving the police department administrative staff to either lease or, lease to own kind of option. You'll notice the cost for tenant improvements only on this slide is wide ranging. And the reason for that is looking at a building, any building in the district, without bringing expert engineers in for inspection, which we did not do for this analysis. We really only relied on the expertise of a professional colleague of the police chief who was able to give us some ballpark ideas of what the range might be depending on the level of improvement needed. For example, we don't know if full seismic upgrades need to be made to any of the buildings in Kensington, and we won't know until and unless we hire an engineer. We don't know electrical upgrades. What would those look like? Those kinds of things. So these are ballpark ranges based on a contractor who has built and done construction work for public safety buildings before. So they are knowledgeable. It's not just, my next door neighbor or something like that. It's actually somebody who's steeped in this and recently built a public safety building. So those are the one-time tenant improvement ranges. And then looking at a lease agreement, we have already looked at a building, staff have already looked at a building in Kensington and looked at ranges, worked with the property owner to look at possible ranges of what a lease agreement could look like over, in this case, a 15-year period, starting out in the low end with a total of $5,300 a month to the high end in 15 years of $8,000 a month, with total square footage of just over 2,650 square feet is what we'd be looking at. So it's still actually under what the optimal was that we heard about earlier in the presentation, but certainly more than the district has today or would have staying in the public safety building. And then the last option C is the option of possibly, and this option was taken from the idea of possibly the district donating land that has already been identified in a previous study on the Arlington south of the library. New construction would be approximately $800 a square foot. So for example, if we did a 3,000 square foot building with just PD and admin staff, it'd be roughly 2.4 million. If it was everybody together with the optimal with cuts option from the fire district's feasibility study in 2014, more like 8 million. There has been some conversation about how accurate would the $800 a square foot be. And I just wanted to mention, General Manager Hensel sent me an article that was just published last year announcing the grand opening of San Rafael's new public safety facility, and it came out to just a little over $800 a square foot. So we think that that's still on par, and keep in mind that building a new building to code that's seismically sound is always easier than retrofitting, which is why those wide swinging ranges in the option B are, seem pretty huge in comparison to this being more clear cut, because we don't know what an existing building offers or does not offer in terms of, seismic upgrades and electrical and those kinds of things. So it's an unknown quantity in that regard. So those are the three options. Here we have just a quick sort of side-by-side cost comparison with one-time expenses that, again, they do vary widely. And ongoing expenses of, something in the neighborhood of more than $4,000 a month with option A, staying in the public safety building, $5,300 to little over $8,000 over 15 years. And then of course, owning the building is just, really is the ongoing building maintenance and site maintenance that would be needed. And that is assuming donated land, of course. If it's not donated, then that price point would change. So, basically in thinking about the, responding to the present, preparing for the future, the way I think about it, and I have been thinking about it since I arrived, is all of these considerations and board concerns, community concerns, staff needs, the framework that we work in, especially the regulatory one that's hard to get away from, long-term financial sustainability and long-range planning for the district. And so, finding that sweet spot is what I usually call it, but optimal, desirable result is a combination of all of these things. And I'm hopeful that this presentation has helped sort of set the stage for the board's next meeting, joint board meeting with the fire district on March 25th at 7 o'clock, and will help to continue this dialogue and conversation and really move the conversation on a trajectory and a forward direction so that we can start to bring resolution to this longstanding conversation. With that, that concludes my presentation, our presentation, and it's discussion and question time.
Thank you. I want to thank both you and Captain Gankaz for making this presentation, and Interim Chief Schuld for his work on this as well. As I said, we would actually go to public comment now, just to give members of the public an opportunity to comment. And if there are any questions that are raised, I ask that Captain Gankaz and General Manager Brown note them, and then we will also then have the staff comment on what they've heard from the public so far, and then we will go to board discussion and comment as well. So if you are in the public audience and wish to speak, please raise your hands. I'd like to give everyone a chance to raise their hands now so I can see if we're going to have a lot of questions and comments at this time. So I'm going to wait a minute just to sort of see how many we're going to have to make sure that our 3-minute limit will work for us. Okay, I see 4 folks right now. So again, we ask that everyone speak once on the item for up to 3 minutes, and I will endeavor to keep time with some assistance. So just give me one moment to get to that part of my telephone, and I'll go ahead and do them in the order I see them. First up will be Gail Feldman. Gail, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so my comments are going to mostly just reference back to the presentation. I just saw it today, so I didn't have a lot of time to reflect on it, and I did want to hear the presentation. But I think there's some things in the presentation that are not accurate, and also just need to sort of have some reality check to, the situation here in Kensington. So I'm just going to jump into those immediately. One is, as far as the number of personnel that we've had, I served on the board back in 1997. At that point, we did have, I believe, 9 officers. I believe in the report, it suggests that back when the building was built, there were 5. So I can't speak to what we had in 1970, but I certainly know that in the 90s, early 90s, we had already 9 officers working out of that building. As far as the number of calls for service, I think there was some reference in the report that, we've had growth in the responses to complaints or services, but in fact, from what I can tell from the data that we have, Brown Taylor said that we had like an average of 4.6 calls for service back in 2009. And then Matrix in their recent study said we're down to 4 calls for service per 24 hours, sorry. So that seems to show that we've had a pretty much stable workload as far as calls go. I'm not gonna, try to suggest that there's not more, paperwork and such, but if we don't have calls for service, then there's not going to be that much more paperwork if we're not having more crime going on. However, it's possible there's more paperwork per crime. I won't dispute that. As far as square footage space for each staff person, not all staff work at the same time. So you might have, as far as I understand, about 3 officers, including the chief maybe, in the building at one time. So I think that has to be adjusted, because it looked to me like your figures showed that, you're taking 10 personnel and dividing up the space. So that's not completely accurate how it works. Just in general, as far as, the space, Matrix did not comment in their, $70,000 study about space issues. And so I'm just wondering why all of this is coming to the fore right now. Obviously, because of the public safety building, but I would think that Matrix would have raised it as, a significant concern if there had been some things that they saw that were interfering or that were not meeting regulatory requirements. And I know they weren't tasked specifically with that, but that is a concern. I object to some of the use of the current health pandemic as a metric for how space should be allocated. I mean, this is a concern.
Gail, you're at 3 minutes, so if I could just ask you to wrap up in the next 30 seconds.
Okay, sure. And just to say that, I know that we've said that Kensington's uncommon is a uncommon district. We have a shared police and fire facility, but, we're really unusual in the fact that we have 2 special districts where in most cities, one board would oversee both fire and police. And I think we just have to say Kensington is Kensington, and we shouldn't, say that the police and fire should be in a separate building necessarily. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next up will be John Gaccioni. Hold on one moment. John, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak now.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. In looking at the 3 possibilities, have you looked at the idea of building a new building for the police separately on some available vacant land? I didn't see that in the 3 pieces. Is that a possibility? I'll raise that. And second, I can't get past why we'd want to stay on Arlington for 2 of our public safety agencies. We know an earthquake is out there and that the incidence of fire is becoming more prevalent. So wouldn't it be really wise to separate them now while we're going through this, so we could have at least one agency that could be whole and be ready to respond, and that would be the police. Other than that, all the information looked interesting. It's a tough problem to solve. A lot of different angles to it. But that's my comments. Thank you, and I'm done.
Thank you. Okay. Linda Lipscomb, you'll be up next. You should be able to speak now.
I love it when I'm able to speak now. Thank you, Sylvia. Look, I know, can you hear me?
Yes.
People usually can. I don't think it's any secret that like me, many of Kensington's citizens believe that the proposed expansion of the fire department is a bit of overreaching to accommodate for a lot of El Cerrito's needs. I'd like to urge the board and its representatives in negotiating, because I know you're going into a joint committee situation, a joint board situation. I'd like to urge you to look to that about whether there's some overreach on the part of the land grab, if you will, space grab of the fire department. My understanding, and I could be way off here, is they're looking to have like eight firefighters accommodations in the building. Hello, like two of them are staying there at night. Let's take a close look to what they're asking for and see if some of that space that our police department, which is spectacular, and I'd like to build them the Taj Mahal. It doesn't have to do with what I think of them. I nonetheless think we got along this far. Can we do a whole lot with a whole lot less than is being proposed? Look at those issues. And I wanted to know whether, as it came up with the lease, why are the Kensington taxpayers paying the Kensington taxpayers to be in the same building? This is preposterous. Years ago, we had $1 per annum lease of the building to the police. And that is perfectly acceptable, and that's what it should be. There should be no cost for that. Possibly a sharing of expense in some other respect. But this is the Kensington taxpayer on both ends of the deal. So let's look at that situation again as it came up. This also points up consolidation and why we should be one town, why we should be operating with one board, and have our respective officers that take care of the oversight for both of our public safety needs. And I am deeply grateful to our police who have kept us as one of the safest communities in California with their little building and being squished all the time as they are by the fire department. And by the way, Marty, I could barely listen to you. That whatever distortion is on your microphone, it is hard to listen to, but because you were so good, I listened to it. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Linda. I also want to remind everybody that your comments are to be addressed to our board. And so I know that there's some discussion of the fire board here, and there are fire board members here. I would ask that anyone who is addressing comments, please address them to our board, and that goes for the next set of folks as well. So give me one moment to get the next speaker up. Pat Gillette, you're next. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. So first I want to thank Mike for the really nice presentation, and Marty, thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. But I think what it underscores is what I raised earlier, which is we have a community that has a very rich history and that is rich with assets of people who have talents in many areas. And as I listened to the presentation, what I noticed is that there were a number of things that were incorrect or didn't reflect the history of Kensington. And that's because, to your credit, you tried to do this by yourself. But it just, to me, underscores what this board should be thinking about. If we're going to make this kind of investment, whether it be in keeping our public safety building or building something new, we ought to have community involvement, and it ought to be more than just at a meeting where we get a presentation and you guys talk about it. I understand there's another meeting coming up on the 25th, but we need to have community input. We have expertise in the community and we have history in the community, and that needs to be included in this decision. We already know, Marty, that we aren't going to be able to get, you aren't going to be able to get community support for building the police station in the park, which is what you were referencing when you said a land grant of some sort. That's not going to happen. The community will be up in arms if that happens. It's been vetted previously, and I understand that you don't have a history here, you don't know that, but that it's just silly to be proposing things that have already been talked about without taking that into consideration and coming up with a solution. I also want to reiterate what I said earlier and what Linda Lipscomb just said, which is it makes absolutely no sense to have two boards doing the same thing, which is protecting our community. And it makes no sense to be paying $3,000 a month, which for 1,200 square feet, I think is what Mike said we have. $3,000 a month for 1,200 square feet, seriously? On our board, we reduced that rent to $1. $1, because it's taxpayer money to taxpayer money. It makes no sense, and that's what this board should be doing. And if the board had done its job previously, that you would have continued that $1 a month rent instead of agreeing to this ridiculous $3,000 a month for 1,200 square feet. It sounds like an apartment in San Francisco, for God's sake. So I want to encourage the board to think about how we use our tax dollars and how we can use them more wisely, which includes giving serious consideration to consolidation of the districts and making a building that will work for everyone. I also want to say, Mike, in all deference to you and our officers, and I really do appreciate everything that our officers do, and I did when I was on the board as well, we can't afford the optimal. We can't afford it. We're a small community, and there's no reason why we should pay for the optimal. We need to have, in my opinion, what's necessary to get the work done. And that's not 200, 500, 20,000 square feet. That's enough to get the work done for the officers who are there. You said that there's only one officer on duty at a time. So you can't measure, as Gail Feldman pointed out, the square footage based on 10 officers. They're not all there at the same time. We have 2 sets of staff because we have 2 districts, so we need more space.
You're at
because of the
3
staff.
minutes, Pat. Are you?
Okay, I'm gonna finish my comments, Sylvia, if you'll give me the same privilege you gave to the other speakers.
Exactly what I'm doing. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You've got 30 seconds
Thank
to
you.
wrap up.
Okay, so I would really encourage the board to take into consideration the history, the talent we have in our community, and the need to really think out of the box here about how we can use our taxpayer dollars wisely and not be paying ourselves over and over again for the same services. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask Julie Stein to go ahead and unmute yourself and speak.
Thank you, Sylvia. Hopefully this will be really brief. First of all, this was my first exposure to Captain, I'm sorry if I pronounce your last name incorrectly, Captain Gankes. So thank you very much for your presentation, and it's nice to sort of see you and meet you virtually. I just want to kind of reflect on a couple of calibration points without any sort of bias toward outcome. There was mention that the architect did a study in the 2014-2015 timeframe and recommended the optimal for police. I think it was 3,000 and something square feet, and optimal for fire. I think that if you wade through that very comprehensive binder that summarizes that study, and if you listen to some of the architect's presentations, he will tell you very clearly that he designed an optimal program based on the information he was given. So at that point in time, Kevin Hart was the police chief, and he was essentially asked, you know, for like a wish list, what would be the best grade, you know, perfect sort of public safety building. They designed a number of holding cells into the building that would separate males and females and juveniles and different restrooms. But it seems to me since then, with the evolution of police chiefs from Chief Simpkins to Chief Schuld, I don't want to speak for you, but there are deficiencies in the present facility that have been cited, but they haven't really cited the lack of holding cells and some of the other aspects of that optimal study that the architect did put to paper, but was based on input that he received at the time from the police chief. And the second thing I just wanted to point out, I think the benchmark of $8 million from 2014 for the new facility, I think it's outdated and not especially relevant. I'm not an expert in this field, but I think a number of members of our community, as well as our fire chief, have brought to our attention that the city of San Pablo built a brand new fire station, fire only, 2 stories. I think it was around 6,000 square feet, far away from an earthquake fault on flat ground. And that building cost $13 million. So I think it's really naive to think that we could build a new building with the numbers that were given to us on a hillside for both agencies at 10,000 or 11,000 square feet. I think it's probably not realistic to think we can do that for $8 million now. So I would like to see some kind of independent review of recent construction of comparable facilities to get a good benchmark for what it would likely cost us now. That's all I have. Thank you, Sylvia.
Exactly at 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right.
That was fortuitous. Kevin Padian, you will be up next. Give me one moment. You should be able to speak now, Kevin.
Thank you, Sylvia. Because Julie and I are both on the fire board, although not speaking for it, I just want to say we don't want to violate the Brown Act. So if there's more than 2 of us who want to speak, it would be useful to know that. Otherwise, I might stand down.
Director Nagel is on the call, but he is not raising his hand to speak.
Thanks very much. Okay. I want to say that personally, I am very happy for this report, and I want to disagree with Linda Lipscomb about her comments to the board, because it's very important to understand that, like the police department and the wonderful presentation we just heard, the fire department is working by regulations that have been improved since the 1960s when that building was built. And we can't just look at one department's requirements and upgrades. We have to look at both departments. I am very saddened by characterizations that the fire department is trying to take over the entire building. It's absolutely not true, and I believe, with my conversations with both police and fire, that they're doing the best they can. I think they've been doing an incredible job of trying to work it out for one building. Recall that the current conclusion that your PowerPoint presentation tonight reaches was actually reached by the architect engaged by the fire district last year. And then this board asked whether we couldn't consider with the architect whether we could fit both boards and both staffs in the building. And so we said, of course, take a look. And so you had ensuing drawings and nothing is finalized. But now tonight you're getting a report that says, you know what, this is really hard. So my feeling is that we do have a lot of money that's taxpayer money from Kensington, and that both districts should work together to help each other. And that if we can find facilities that, however we finance it or buy it or share it or loan it, that we're all working together to make this happen. I don't think it's police versus fire. It's been police and fire versus the public safety building constraints. But now I hope that with tonight's presentation, it will be seen that there's no way that we can fit both those departments in there reasonably. And so we have to seek other solutions. And the fond hope that we could continue on as we are should please be put to rest so that we can actually craft a reasonable solution. Thank you guys for doing this. And that was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. The last member of the public that I see is Chris Hafner. I'm going to allow you to talk. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Thank you for the presentation. It seems as though the critical path going forward, which I think is something all of us are interested in knowing what that looks like, would include an understanding of the long-term financial viability of making a decision like this. And so I'm wondering at what point in time you would be really focusing on a long-term financing strategy and possible revenue sources for a decision of this nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on one moment. Celia Conkis has raised her hand, but I seem to have lost her. Let me try one more time. There she is. Okay. Celia, go ahead and unmute yourself and speak.
I have to find myself.
You're there.
Oh,
We can hear you. Oh, now we can't.
all right.
Now we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that nobody is really recognizing that there isn't a very big piece of vacant land to be taken, to be used for a new public safety building or police building. What we're really talking about is Kensington Park. And that was the land that was purchased. This was surplus land that was purchased a long time ago. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date. And the residents of the community voted overwhelmingly to tax themselves with a bond so that this land could be purchased and saved as a park for the community. And it was to be saved in perpetuity. And this was long before the current people who are making decisions now were involved with making that purchase. The bond was recently retired, quite recently, and I think that one has to recognize that that parkland is intended to be there for the entire community. It's not just vacant surplus land. I hope that people will understand that. That's all.
Thank you. All right, any more members of the public wish to speak before we go to board? And we'll actually let General Manager Brown and Captain Gankaz address some of the items that were brought to their attention through public comment, perhaps, and then we'll go to some board discussion. Okay, seeing no members of the public, I'll allow General Manager Brown and Captain Gankaz, if you can address some of the items that were raised to your attention in public comment.
Certainly. First of all, a couple of times the number of officers in different eras, how many officers we had or didn't have. And so it was a bit of a struggle to actually put that together without, relying completely on the memory of people, quite frankly. The budget and looking at some of the other documentation that we have, Catherine in particular worked on helping along with Captain Gankaz to try to piece together how many employees there were at different eras. So if we didn't get that correct, I apologize. We did the best we could with the information that we had. I think the only other thing I wanted to say, because I appreciate that there's a lot of passion and in some cases frustration around this issue. And I knew coming in as the new kid on the block doing this presentation, that it was going to be a challenge to bring everything together and bring every single consideration that has been discussed over the last 4 or 5 years, let alone even longer than that. So, I think we tried to do the best we could to give you all a snapshot of kind of where we are and a sense of what needs further research and what are some directions researching further without, spending, a laborious amount of time and effort that could take us months and months to kind of move the needle on this conversation. So that was one that I just wanted to mention. I think the only other thing I guess I would mention about the land, you are correct. Both General Manager Hansel and I have looked at the reports and looked at the land, and I was referencing, I guess, what is technically in the park. However, when looking at the design and the plans that were proposed, both General Manager Hansel and I thought they were that there was a reasonable potential proposal there. Of course, if the board and the community disagrees, then that's going to end that conversation. I understand that. But I think that since we thought there was some potential still there, it felt to me like it was worth at least presenting the concept. And if it gets shot down, okay, we'll move on to the next thing. But like I said, we thought that there was some reasonableness and possibility in considering that site. And there might be other sites. There's been discussion about other sites that would require probably purchasing, not donations. So that would be a bigger challenge for sure. I don't, unless there's something specific, President Hassai, that you'd like me to respond to, I think I'll maybe hand it over to Captain Gankaz and see if there was something that really stood out for him that he might want to respond to.
That's fine. Thank you.
Good morning. I did it again. Good evening. I agree with the general manager. I thought everybody's passionate about their questions and their community, which is fantastic. And they're all relevant and great questions. I think I could maybe touch on a couple at best. Could we build a separate structure for police? Yes, separate police structures are built regularly, but they're extraordinarily expensive and probably realistically out of the range of what would be reasonable for this community. The other one that I may be able to touch on is the 10 people, 10 officers here. The 10 officers aren't here all the time, and I would absolutely agree with that. But we do have to think about building a facility that can accommodate more than the lowest denominator of who would be here at any one time. So it would be unreasonable to design a police facility based on the minimal amount of people that would be here on a given time. And there are times where there are 7 or more employees in this facility at one time. And that's regularly during the week. So when you include district staff as well, that puts a burden and difficulty in operating in such a small location. And lastly, I would agree, one of the questions or statements that was brought up that it was important to at least open the dialogue and get the conversation going again. And I wholeheartedly agree that police and fire work together and do a heck of a job in the climate and conditions that they're working in now. And it's important that we move forward to at least work together and try to come up with a better solution for the community of Kensington. I don't have anything else, Director Hassai, unless the Chief of Police would have information on that.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments. Yeah, Captain Gankaz is correct. There are times when we only have 1 officer on duty, but there are times during the day that we have 6 personnel within the building. And there have been times where I've had Captain Gankaz work on confidential items that he had to leave his office and not work on it because he doesn't have the privacy to do it. Likewise with my detective sergeant, I had him doing something. We had to kick the traffic safety officer out of a community meeting so he could accomplish his task. So, and then on top of that, I can't have a confidential meeting in my office without speaking very softly because you can hear through the walls because of all the tight quarters here. So I agree with all the comments, but the facility is totally inadequate for a police department of our size. And I don't have any skin in the game. I won't be here when the new facility is here. I'm doing it based on my experience. I was second in command of moving into a $15 million remodel building in San Pablo. And within 2 years, we had outgrown it. And so when you plan for something, you can't plan just to try and fit personnel into an office. There also has to be some kind of comfort for an office, for personnel. Anybody that's working in an office setting knows they got to have some kind of personal workspace. And they work there 40 hours, sometimes 50 hours a week. you got to have some kind of comfort when you come to work. That's just part of being a good employer. And then just one other touch, crime is going up all over the place. Kensington is unique because of its geography. It's going to be insulated from a lot of crime. But when you see my annual report coming in April, there's 43% of the incidents have gone up from the year before, but that means everything. So I'm not going to place a lot of emphasis on that. That means extra patrols, everything. So, but for example, 164% increase in thefts. So we do have an increase in crime for various reasons. I'm not saying that's a trend. I'm saying that we gotta be vigilant that about the incidents. One person said that our calls for service are the same. Well, they're not the same, but they go up and down, just like crime rates go up and down all the time. So they're going to go up and they're going to go down. But this facility is not adequate for a police department to run professionally. And it just depends on what kind of police department you want. You want a professional running police department, or do you want to just piece it together and try to make do with what you got? But and it's also has to do with money. So I know everybody's in a pickle. So I don't envy the board and the decisions they have to make. We can only give our professional opinion, and that would be my professional opinion of 32 years of being in police work. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it up now for, I'm going to close the public comment period and open it up for the board conversation and comments and questions from the directors. So I just ask that you, raise your hand as a participant so I can call on you as well as a panelist. And I'm gonna, here we go. I'm having some trouble with my own controls here, so give me a second. Let's see. Catherine, are you my co-host? Because I am unable. Sorry, Linnell, I'm unable to see the panelists other than Marty's name. And so I wonder if, let's see, if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, just unmute yourself as a board member, and please go ahead and address Captain Gankaz or General Manager Brown.
I'll go. I had my hand raised, but
great. Oh yeah,
so I did do it. Yeah. Thanks for putting this presentation together, all of you. And I've got a couple of small comments about some of the data. I think there's a lot wrong in here, but I don't want to go through all of it. Just a couple of things. As far as I understand, at least up until Chief Simpkins, the chiefs have said we were in compliance with the DOJ. I think we might have got some waivers, but that was my understanding, at least up until Chief Simpkins, that we were in compliance. There is option A. Again, I'm not going to go through all these because I think there's a lot of problems. But option A, I think the agreement was that the administrative staff would definitely move out because there would not be. If you had to fit it into both, had to fit both departments into that building, there's no way you get the admin in there. So my biggest concern is that the first time I saw this, and I imagine the rest of the board, was last night or this morning, whenever it was put up on the website. And I wasn't asked for any input. Rochelle and I did a presentation about a year ago. Obviously, it was a different type of presentation. It was just more looking at locations. We didn't get into police requirements or really finances beyond estimated cost. But we do have some institutional knowledge of this effort. I think all the board members do. And again, people have talked about some of the numbers probably aren't accurate at all. The 8 million for a combined building, I think, has long been out of date. So I am disappointed that this was put together without any input from the board. You could have done it in a Brown Act way by just sending one-way communications and asking us for input. But I don't consider this definitive or accurate at all. You know, Chief Simpkins, there was an option B, which is a different option B that we're talking about. Option B with a design. He actually had a design that he was happy with some minor issues. And we've gone from that to it's being totally unacceptable. So I don't know how we came from, yes, we can make this work, it's not great, but we can make it work, to there's absolutely no way we can make it work. It's almost like you've given up on trying to make it fit into the same building and you're just moving around other options. So I'm not happy about that. But I think in general, this needs to be vetted a lot more by board members and community members. I think some of the people have quite rightly raised the issue of some of the inaccuracies. And if this was put out with a sort of request for comment type of issue, we might have cleaned up a lot of the problems. So I'm not sure if it's worthwhile even discussing it, because I think it's a lot wrong and it needs to be sent to the board members and we could give you our opinions about what's right and what's wrong with it. So it's, again, I don't think it's worth talking about anymore.
Any other board members want to ask questions or comment? I see Cyrus, your hand is up. Go ahead, you should be able to unmute yourself.
First off, I disagree that we should be doing this thing where we're all sending stuff to the general manager through emails and not having the public see that, because that pretty much, again, is to Kataya's comment, the funhouse mirror of transparency. I mean, we can say this is a draft report and maybe it should have been better to have just an open discussion on what we all know about this and got it on the first page before this was done. But I disagree with the notion that this should have been done through email and then, you know, brought up as a pre-baked thing. So that's just a process thing. But I just am going to raise a more fundamental thing, just like regardless of, say, where we go in town, like I've heard everything from that there is not faults in the lot by the Arlington to there is faults, depending on who you ask. Or if you go by like the buildings near the gas station, there's a question of where the Arlington, I need to check the maps if there is actually a fault line near there. And then maybe only lower Kensington with the whole concept of the fault goes away. But I guess I've heard various people like vaguely bring up the notion of, can the state not waiver the Alcos-Priola Act around that building given it's an essential service and that our options are so limited? Because like every law, there are waivers the state dispenses knowing that a law cannot subsume every, you know, edge case. And the county has in the past given us sort of like leeway on things, and even the state has. Like I remember when Prop 13 from the Outlook papers, the state took action to protect the special districts when the whole thing, you know, collapsed inward funding wise. So I'm just wondering how much has actually been explored in this waiver concept truly, that we can get some dispensation to say you expand on that site if you do X, Y, and Z to deal with the fact there might be a fault. Like I'm trying to understand how much has actually been done by the district in good faith, rather than someone thought of it at the last minute and we said, well, we're not going to discuss it anymore because we're already, you know, 3 feet deep into this. So that's sort of my one thought, like, because that's the concept of where the fault lines are is gonna haunt a lot of locations along the Arlington. And when you move into lower Kensington, there becomes a question of where can we even put the building? Because I've heard the EdMub site, but that's EdMub's property. And then we're dealing with EdMub, and that's a whole nother can of worms. So I'm just gonna bring it up again, like, and ask, do we even know how much has been done in asking the state and county what are our options given this tight nook we're in? And I think that's really, to me, that's the first obvious question, because if it turns out they can say like, oh yeah, we were aware of this problem, but you never did these things. If you do all these administrative things, there's say a 80% or 70% chance, I'm just making a number up, that we can run this through the state. Maybe we'll allow you to expand the footprint there for public safety reasons. So, I mean, if someone has definitively debunked that, then great, let's see that, and then let's start, screaming that the sky is falling down. Because before we explored the most obvious option of saying all these other sites everyone's fighting over, let's just say, can the state help us? So I think that's really, to me, the biggest question, because then that would also help resolve a lot of this funding thing, or how we're going to pay for a new building, or the joint occupancy issue and all of that.
Okay, this
Again, I understand this, I've heard this idea tossed around, but no one's actually given me a definitive answer, and I'd like to know if there was a definitive answer.
I think this can come up on the 25th. I think that the fire board and their architects have done a lot of this work. I do think from what I remember from a presentation a while back, we were told that we could not do anything to increase the envelope or get extra space, and that is at the heart of some of the problems. But I don't want to obviously speak for the fire board and their vendors, but that may be something to raise on the 25th. But I do think that the fault lines have been studied as extensively as possible myself. Any other director want to ask any questions, make any comments?
Oh, there's one thing to the fault line thing. The reason the fault line issue comes up with the building is because we don't necessarily know if there is a fault line behind the building. We know there's one in front of it, and there's the theories of how there's a lot of splinter faults there, but at least, again, I've tried to ask around, do we know if there's a fault there? Well, maybe there is, or that it's really hard to actually entrench there because of the retaining wall. So there's, again, there's some ambiguity because the fault splinters.
Director Saraswat is nodding her head yes, and I believe the answer is yes as well. They did check that out. They did, I think, even trench and go and do some extra study of that, because that was an initial question, but I think the answer they came up with was yes. But again, you could ask again.
Yeah, can I just jump in there?
Yes.
Yeah, my understanding is this: they did a fair amount of study, and they did enough study to make it. Well, I mean, you never know definitive unless you just rip that hillside apart, and they're not going to do that. But they determined enough that it really wasn't worth going any farther. The best was just to assume there's a fault there and deal with it, because the actual alternative was just sort of unpalatable. So that's because I've asked that the same question, and the answer I got, yes, they did look into it enough to satisfy themselves that there was a fault, and to go any farther would kind of be actually impossible, because you'd rip the hillside up and you might have houses collapse. And so the only realistic option was to assume there's a fault and go with that. And I've also asked a number of times, have they looked into the issue of, could you expand the footprint? Because that would be ideal. That would solve a lot of problems. And I was told by the architect a number of times, yes, they did look into it, and I think they've possibly even talked to the county. But the architect, according to what he told me, was yes, they've looked into it. It was just not possible to expand it. And again, when we had the first meeting with the architect with the police to try to find this joint solution, before we got started, I asked him again, are you sure? Have you verified that there's really no way to expand the footprint? And the architect said, yeah, there's no way. Now I can't speak to what kind of research he did and how definitive his answer really means, but that's what I was told. So.
Yeah, I guess which is my point, is we're being told these things, but where's the paperwork that says this is what they said, and we know exactly, because all this secondhand stuff is what's bothering me.
Director Saraswat is saying something, and she's going to call me, and maybe she can speak through my phone. Is that what you like? Would you like to do that? You could try it if that was going to work. I do think that we have to take a lot of these, the architects and the people that have been engaged, at their professional word. I don't know that there's ever perfectly definitive answers when you're trying to deal with the thing. So hold on a moment. Okay, I'm going to put Director Saraswat on speaker and see whether that will work for her to be able to address some of these issues. And Director Saras-Walk, go ahead and give it a try. No, her phone is not connecting. Okay. Lots of technical difficulties today. I do want to ask a question too of the general manager, which is, I didn't see anything in this presentation about the annex. We have had, and again, Director Deppie is correct. This was not vetted through any of the other directors in advance. And I don't know whether you knew or had given much thought or consideration to the renovation of the annex and the financial analysis, which could potentially house, the district staff. That didn't seem to come across in the presentation. You need to unmute yourself.
No, I had not done any analysis on it. I know that it had been a conversation and a consideration in the past and has been talked about, but I did not include it in this particular analysis, no. And I know that my understanding is it needs quite a bit of work, renovation work, to even have people in it, actually working in it, so. But
well, I don't think that, I don't know that, we know how much work it needs, but it is obviously something we own and could potentially renovate.
Right, okay.
All right. Okay. If there are no more board questions or comments about the presentation, I think that we will move on to the next. Director Natoli?
Yes, the answer to the question is the law is very clear. And yes, the county can give a waiver, but they bear the liability for any injury or death should that occur if they grant a waiver.
I wonder if they've ever granted a waiver, given that.
That's right. That's why it's never going to be given.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So I think that, we're going to continue this discussion on the 25th at 7 p.m. Obviously, that is going to be a joint board meeting. Again, it will be for information discussion. There will not be decisions taken at that time, but it's an opportunity for both boards to get together to hear information at one time from one place and to continue to try to work out these issues. I think, as others have said, the boards and the chiefs have worked as best as possible, not at cross purposes, but at looking to figure out the best way for both the safety and the tax dollars for Kensington residents, and we're going to continue to grapple with this. Next on our agenda is just our regular type of reports and comments. So apart from this item, do any directors have comments or reports for the rest of the board? I see Cyrus's hand up.
I had a quick question going back to the last item. It's just like, how are we going to be publicizing this meeting? And is there like going to be a way where we submit Q&As? So at the very least, the general manager can be like, these questions were asked by the board and I have gone and compiled information so that I'm not thinking on my feet.
We can certainly do that. Actually, the GM Hansel and I have been talking and also talking with your former interim general manager, Bill Lindsay, who is going to be facilitating that joint board meeting. And so we kind of wanted to get through both of our board meetings this week to sort of reassess and actually solidify the exact approach to the joint board meeting. So if this is something that the board would like to have, to submit questions to us in advance with like a set deadline so that we can try to answer them and get them back to you before the 25th. More than happy to accommodate.
But they can be then brought up at the 25th so that, if they're asked, and it's brought up in the discussion.
Why don't we do this, Director Madavi? This is not quite part of this item, although I think that this presentation raised questions. So as part of the general manager's report, she'll be reporting on the meeting on the 25th. And at that point, maybe we can give some direction on that item where it's a little bit more directly tied. But I do think that this presentation did raise questions, and certainly I think board members should be free to respond to General Manager Brown's presentation with additional questions individually. And then let's discuss the 25th General Manager Brown as part of your report, if that's okay. And then Cyrus will go back to some more specific instruction there. I want to just kind of stick to the agenda item. Director Natoli, do you have any other comments or reports?
No.
Okay, because your hand's up. I'm sorry. I'll just lower it. Okay. Any other reports? No. Okay. We're going to go to we'll go to the general manager's report now.
Wait, is this public comment for directors? Or I'm just trying to figure out
This
how
is just a time. So we've just kind of moved we've moved this part of the meeting to the back. It's not public comment. It's just any board member has general comments or reports to give to the board. And
okay,
then
to discuss the agenda structure, would that go in her report, or could I make a comment about that now?
I believe if the general manager raises it in her report, that would be the appropriate time to have a discussion on it.
Okay, I will leave it.
It's just a matter of timing. Okay, so General Manager Brown, could you give us your report?
Certainly. So I'll just start out with the things that haven't been mentioned so that I'll end with the things that where I think there's going to be more feedback from the board. A couple of things I just wanted to mention. We're taking care of the tree on the Arlington, that eucalyptus tree that is south of the library. It has come down some aspects, some parts of it have been removed by the county, but it still needs to be fully addressed. And so we're in the midst of doing that and hope to have that taken care of in the next couple of weeks. We're also taking a look more globally at the park at some scope of work and costing out additional tree pruning and removal of brush that dates back to, I believe Director Natoli had done some estimates on this back in November, December of 2019, and we're revisiting that scope of work because it is actually in the budget, and just making sure the same things need to be done that were identified over a year ago, and updating those bids. And so we're working on that as well. The other two items I was going to mention were, well, there's a couple more now, but the East Bay Regional Park reimbursement. I'm working with Director Shares Watt on getting all that work together so that we can resubmit and get our reimbursement of $158,000 for the community center. And that'll close out the renovation of that project. And we're also, we do have funds that have been approved for Prop 68 grant. I believe Director Modavi worked on that, and we'll be looking for a project. So if you have any feedback on that, that'd be great to hear. Otherwise, we'll be coming back to all of you with some recommendations for how to spend those $160,000 grant based on the criteria that's required for the grant, of course. And then if you want to now, I mean, the joint board meeting is scheduled, it is scheduled for March 25th, Thursday at 7 p.m. And certainly if the board would like to give some feedback on the format or questions, as Director Modavi mentioned, more than happy to take that on. We're still, like I said, we were kind of waiting for our board meetings this week, GM Hansel and myself, to solidify the format for the 25th, the meeting on the 25th. So this would be a great time to get additional input. And then lastly, I mean, I did mention the agenda format and tried to explain why, what we did and what we moved around. I think I would just add to my comments from earlier in the evening. This is based on, best practices and based on my experience in more recently completely revamping another agenda format and using outside consultants to really help us kind of come into the 21st century. So I just basically lifted that format because I know that it is already something that's considered a best practice. So with that, that concludes my report.
So I think what I'm hearing is that if board members have questions in advance of the 25th, they could send them to you so that you could use that in your preparations for the meeting on the 25th. Also, The meeting has been referenced in a recent Outlook article, although it had not yet been finalized. The date was tentative at the time. And of course, we will be looking for ways to be informing the community of the meeting.
If I could just add, GM Hansel and I have talked about releasing a joint press release in advance, obviously posting it on our Facebook as well and get that out there, both the Kensington Facebook page as well as the police department's Facebook page. So those are some things we've already been talking about in terms of getting the information out about the meeting.
Thank you.
And also the next door. I know a lot of people seem to hang out on that.
Right, right.
Okay,
I guess, may I finish, or should we can
No,
go
no.
around in circles?
No, go ahead.
I guess my other question really was going back to this agenda format, in that I'm just trying to understand really why putting the two together was completely necessary. I know it maybe looks nicer, but it sounds like they're both completing the same goal. And I usually talk in the sense that if you want to emphasize that people can do something, you make it obvious. You don't put it as in the footnotes that, oh, this will be when we take public comment. So at the very least, wouldn't you better say, public comment and action calendar acceptance, just so people know where in that schedule they are able to do that part of the Brown Act process?
Are you
just changing the title?
Yeah, I just, because when I read it the first time, I'm like, where did public comment go? And then I read through, I'm like, okay, public comment is mentioned in the fine print. And as anyone who reads contracts knows, they don't like having to find things in the fine print.
Do you mean that there is public comment after every item for discussion?
Well, I mean, just like the not on the agenda item public comment. So where she has like, community and consent calendar forum, I don't see why it's so odious about the concept of public comment.
Well,
I know it's a word thing, but it's also like, every agenda and every other sort of Brown Act structure I've seen around here is they usually have like public comment. Those are the words they use. Those are the words in the Brown Act itself. So I guess, it's just like familiarity and ease of access.
I think that the thinking is community sounds a little warmer and friendlier than just public. So, trying to, encourage friendliness around the public comment. That's, if you want to get into semantics, I think that's the only reason for it. But I would also point out that the prior agendas did not have any explicit comment on the consent calendar. It wasn't there. It was, I went back and looked in research for a member of the community who asked me about it. And so now there's actually explicit place that you can comment on the consent calendar where there wasn't before. You would have to, I guess, sort of know the institutional memory.
Well, I'm looking, it says like call to order general public comment. Members of the public may address the board for up to 3 minutes on items not on the agenda. And that was right before board staff communications.
In any case, I think as we go forward with this new format, I think it will be more and more clear, and maybe we can just find a way in the I agree that I wear glasses now, and the fine print is very fine, and maybe we can just work on that a little bit. But I think let's go forward for a little while, and I think people will get the message. And I do also like community forum a lot. It's a little bit, I do think it's a little warmer, but all right. I want to get on to, if it's okay, to get on to the chief's report, which is how we're going to be ending this evening for tonight anyway. And Chief Scholl, do you have anything that you want to talk about?
Just a couple informational comments. First, Kensington Police is working closely with the Kensington Elementary School to conduct a joint fire police and Kensington School District comprehensive fire drill. And currently the school district requires a memorandum in order for students to leave the campus during the fire drill. A date cannot be sent right now, but I have sent official letter to initiate the process. And also the police department submitted a comprehensive grant to the Office of Traffic Safety. The grant proposal requested funding for a software program related to traffic collisions and the interface for uploading the data. The two software programs will expedite the traffic collision information to the statewide integrated traffic recording system and ensure reports are in the correct format and included in our official collision data. Now, this will assist in obtaining traffic-related grants in the future. We will know if we are successful in this grant proposal by June of this year. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you. I will also, just since you raised the school district, say that just to remind General Manager Brown in particular, I think this is, I don't know if it's in the police budget or the general district budget, but we do have a contract with a service that provides crossing guards. And should the schools go back, we would have to, look into arranging that. That is definitely a cost savings for us this year. And there was actually a PTA, a Kensington Hilltop PTA meeting this evening at which school board member Leslie Reckler, who is a resident of Kensington, spoke. There is no determination today on that matter, but it is, as you probably know, nationwide of high interest. And so I just ask that you all do keep that focused and take a look at that contract, and just be aware that if the school does go back, we should be looking at whether we need to put that contract back into effect for the crossing guards. And I believe that we're going to close out our meeting then, unless there's any other questions for the general manager or the chief. And our next meeting will be the joint board meeting between the fire and police boards on March 25th at 7 p.m. And then our next regular meeting will be held on April 8th, 2021.
Do the public get to comment on the reports or have asked questions?
That's not part of the agenda right now. It's not public comment for this, no.
No, like, do they get to ask questions on the reports? Because I'm seeing at least 2 hands raised.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Normally we have in the past, because our public comment period came after these reports, that's what we've done. I guess I'll have to open it for public comment. It wasn't part of the agenda, but.
Well, I mean, not public comment, but comments on the reports or questions on the reports.
Sure. Hold on a second. Thank you for pointing that out, Cyrus. Julie, you should be able to speak.
Just a quick comment on the concept that community forum sounds more welcoming. It sounds more welcoming, but that's not actually what public comment is. The definition of forum is an actual exchange of ideas where, people can ask questions, get answers, and talk with each other. And so I think that may explain some of the, the public sort of discomfort with just calling public comment what it is. And what it's called in most municipalities meetings, that there's a public comment session. People make their comments. They pretty much understand that they're not going to get a response. And that's just how it goes. So I don't know. To me, that's just how I'm interpreting why there's some discomfort with this change in what you call this segment of your meeting, because it's really not a forum. It's still just a one-way comment period, which I think we've all actually been trained over the years to accept. So it seems to me just better to stick with calling it what it is, which is just a comment time, and then you move on to other items.
Okay, thank you. Linda Lipscomb, go ahead.
Hi there. Just to echo what Julie said, public comments are not meant to be conciliatory or necessarily an exchange. They are meant, in fact, it's statutorily set forth that way. It's, I'm recalling now 54954.2 and .3 of the government code. And it says you just get to say what you want to say. So set it out that way. Let people have their public comment, and then they comment in general, and then comment as to each specific item. The limitation is that the board can regulate it, and also that it can be limited in respect of each particular item. But as to the content of general public comment, it cannot be limited, nor can it be forced to be conciliatory. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa Corona, looks like she's our last comment for the evening. Hi, Lisa, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. You know, I found this very confusing as well. Community forum just didn't quite match, and then putting consent with that as well was confusing. So I would agree completely with just saying, you know, public comment and in parentheses, item that are not on the agenda, so that people know there's a space for them to comment on anything, and that it's not related to that they'll have to hold comments for agenda items for that item to come up. So I think that's just so much clearer. It's confusing anyway to people, just saying public comment items not on the agenda, and I think this makes it even more confusing. So I would concur that keep going back to that language would be helpful for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And with that, our meeting has come to an end. So we will adjourn and close out. And again, our next meeting is our next regular meeting is April 8th, and the joint meeting is March 25th at 7 p.m. Wish everyone a good couple of weeks till then. Good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night, Linnell.